Okay, everybody, welcome. Oh, we've got to click this off on the home screen here. Okay, well, welcome everybody. And this is a brand new session that we're creating today. So we welcome your feedback at the end of it. Our intent is to record this and edit it so that we can make it available on demand, as well as the handout that you all have. Hopefully everybody in the home, does everybody get the login? I'm sorry, hi Leah, did you get everybody here get the login? I'm sorry, not the login, but the document that I sent out earlier? Does anybody need it to follow along?
Which document? I
sent out an email earlier that looks like, it says smooth sailing. It's a 3-page handout.
Oh, I'm sure I have it.
Okay, I sent out an email to anybody that had replied that they were coming. If you didn't, what I'm going to do is I'm going to upload it in the chat. We can always edit some of this out, but let me add this in so you'll have it.
Yes, I have it.
Okay, it is uploaded in the chat. So the title of our session today is called Smooth Sailing with Zipform and Docusign. And I'm going to go through the handout a little bit just loosely. And again, like I was saying, we're going to record this and make it available. Over my time of working in the real estate industry, I've seen a lot of changes as far as what tools are available to agents. But as things have come along, two things are very clear. Zipform has become the golden standard in most states for the filling in of forms. And you know, back in the old days, so to speak, we used to literally have clipboards and fill out contracts that were 4- and 5-part forms, NCR forms, and before that even carbon, way, way back. And we would fill them out by hand and then tear them apart and create stacks for clients. It was like the original had to go to the broker, the copy had to go, the copy had to go to the broker or to the agent, and the buyer had to have this one, the seller had to have that one. So you know, things have changed a lot, and the gold standard as far as filling in these forms has definitely become doing it digitally. And the product that is currently the gold standard, and in fact, okay, you guys are making me crazy. Squirrel. And what's going on here is they're flipping a table around. And the gold standard has become Zipforms, and it is in fact the National Association of Realtors recommended format. And there's some ownership by NAR and the California Association of Realtors in Zipforms. There are multiple different versions of electronic signature forms, and some people call them digital signatures, applications out there. And Zipforms has 2 embedded in it. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. The largest one that's in use across the nation, across multiple industries, is Docusign. And that's one we're going to be talking about today. And that is because that is the one that's been selected for a free account for you by Keller Williams. So those are the two applications we're going to be focusing on today. We're not going to so much focus on how do you complete the forms. We'll be doing that in other sessions once again. But right now, what I've learned is that there are basically 4 buckets of things that need to happen for the filling out of forms to be very efficient and to be accurate, so that when you're sending them to your client for signature, you're sending to your BIC for review and signature, that it happens quickly and easily. And more often than not, especially when you're newer, there can be things where your BIC, me or whoever, says, nope, and we decline to sign, and it ends the envelope and it rejects it. And what I found is that agents were then taking about a half an hour to go back and add signatures to the documents. And I was like, show me what you did. And we'd go through that process. I go, oh no, there is a much better way. So the goal of today is to give you some just discrete little steps and have you walk through them today so you're set up. Every time I go through this with an agent writing their first, second, and sometimes third contract, it probably slows us down by about an hour to an hour and a half. So we're going to spend at most an hour and a half today setting you up from the beginning. Now, as we do that, there's 2 things that are required. We need to make sure you are signed in as an active Keller Williams agent, which means your license and your membership with the Board of Realtors is actually enacted, because that's the only way you have access to a true legal Keller Williams Zipforms account and a Docusign account. So do we have anybody that's not in that status at this point? Because if so, you'll just kind of be watching and not able to fully participate. Okay, good. It looks like we're all good with that. So I want to talk a little bit about what are these two software applications that we're talking about, where are they available. First of all, know that both of these have mobile applications as well. The use of them looks different. There's a little bit different, some limitations on what they can do. So it'll be another tool that you need to use, learn how to use if you're using it on a pad device or a phone. But definitely learn how to do that, because I can guarantee you there will be cases when you're maybe out and about, you thought you had everything handled, and something gets kicked back. And instead of saying, I'll run back to the office or I'll run back to my house to my computer, you can do a lot of this on your mobile device. But let's get these set up first, because you will not be able to set these settings up from your phone. Okay, so Zipforms. Your login for Zipforms is typically zipformplus.com. There's no S in it, zipformplus.com. There is a link within the MLS navigation board, the dashboard for this. I don't think it matters if you log into there that way or not. Understand that you have two different accounts. You have a Keller Williams account, and you have an account that's given you by the Board of Realtors. They are linkable, meaning that you can share data between them and have access to your forms on both platforms. But when we work together, we need you to be in the Keller Williams account. If you are not, you will not have access to the Keller Williams forms. I will tell you at this point, for every single transaction, the forms that we typically include, for example, in a purchase contract, if you're having to go back and download them from the intranet as a PDF, you are not doing it right. All of the forms we use on a routine basis are now available thanks to our committee on getting those forms in to Zipform in a native version. The reason that's important is because they will automatically populate for signatures. Okay, so Zipform Plus, you need to know that you have your Keller Williams login. For most of you, it's going to be your Keller Williams email address. There are a few aberrations where it's not. I think everybody in this room right now and everybody online is probably their KW address. That means you need to know your password. By the way, on Zipform, if you don't know your password, and you say that, it will take you through an online function that does not work for a brokerage account. So if you've gone through that and go, oh my God, I put in my NRDS, my NERDS number, and I did this, and I did that, and it didn't work. That's why. The only way you can reset your password on a brokerage-owned account is by coming to one of us that has an admin account, and we will reset it for you, and you'll get a new email that says follow these steps. So probably the two best people to reach out to for that is Carrie or myself. And we can go in and we can reset your account, and you'll get an email with saying it's been reset, follow these steps. Possibly Zipform could do it for you, but I'm not sure if even they can. I honestly don't know the answer to that question. So that's Zipforms. Two accounts, you can link them. So let's do the elephant in the room. The reason that people have two accounts or are concerned about having their documents is frankly because you've either come from another brokerage firm and you have documents in there that you want to access, or because at some point you're like, well, if I keep everything in my Keller Williams account, what if someday in the future I'm not at Keller Williams anymore? It is not a reason for you to be concerned. They're transportable. They can send them to yourself. You can send them to another account, and you can link the two accounts.
And to be super geeky with that, talking to Zipforms directly, Zipforms is not a housing place for your documents anyway, right? So once your transaction is closed, really, if you did like a closed and you updated and closed in Zipforms, that whole thing is going to disappear. You should be, well, when you're with Keller, your fully executed documents are where? In command at the end, right? And so you will have everything you need. Anything else on a Google folder or some other storage that you guys have. And so just know, to Lisa's point, don't worry about it, because you really shouldn't be storing your documents there anyway, although most do.
Yeah, and so let me touch bases on why Zipform did that, or ZipLogix, the parent company, did that, is because they used to keep documents in perpetuity many years ago when they were new. And they then invoked storage limitations, and people started freaking out. And like, basically what'll happen is, I'm damaged because you didn't keep my forms. So they're letting you know it's not a storage repository. In reality, it is a storage repository. It just has an end date where it will delete. And if we do cut off your account because you depart, those files pop in our folders for a certain amount of time, and then after 30 days, I think they do delete. I think they archive or they delete. So you always want to be ahead of the game. I want you guys to be smart and understand the tools. Everybody's going to have different adeptness to software tools and to applications, but do your best within what you can. Okay, so that's Zipform Plus.
Mike, you got a question?
I see your hand up, Mike. Unmute yourself.
Hi, yes, thanks. Before we go any further, I just want to make sure that I can log in correctly to zipformplus.com.
We're going to do that in a second after we get through it, but I do want to make sure you know how to do that. Do you know your login, Mike?
I have no idea.
Okay, so your login is more than likely your email address, your Keller Williams email address, and then you may not know your password. It would have been sent to you when you first joined the Market Center and your account was set up. And if you didn't act on it and go set up the password, you know, if it was one of those things that just came and you kind of didn't know what it was and you didn't pay attention, then you never set up your password. You could go through your emails unless you delete them all. And what would be his search parameter?
You would search for Zipforms and then there would be an invite.
Yeah, don't put the S, just put Zipform in your email. And you'll probably come up with the emails that came out from me about this class and then go back to your older ones. It should be there while we're talking through the introduction and see if you can log in. If you cannot, then I'll actually show you online what we do to reset your password, as we're talking about a little bit more. That may have been before you joined the class. So we'll go through that stage. So great. Anybody else, any other questions?
No, thank you.
Kurt, you're one of the ones, and I know you've used it, but you're one of the ones that has the oddity of not having, you have a username, a user ID that is not your email address, but you probably already know that. Okay, next, what is Docusign? So first of all, Docusign is a digital signature platform. As I said, it's the largest one on the planet. Know this, that digital signature platforms are a fee-based environment. If you're to go into your Zipforms and use one of the two document signature platforms in there, you will on each of them given a few free signatures. And one of the things I've seen is agents will get in there and then it'll say, you've used your free signatures, give us a credit card. That's a sign that you're not logged into the right one. And I've seen a lot of agents cough up their credit card and not have the right one attached, and you'll continue to pay because some of these accounts will be as much as $120, as little as $120 a year, and they go up from there, depending on what you need. So we want to make sure you're using your free Keller Williams account. And we're going to show you how to do that in just a moment. Okay, so that is Docusign and that is Zipforms. Understand that digital signatures are rather new. I'm going to say probably in usage, we had to go through a whole series of steps in the industry to make sure that each state even allowed for digital signatures to be considered legal. And know that there are still some documents that you cannot use a digital signature on, that they must be wet signed. When we talk about a wet signature, we're talking about pen to paper. And the kinds of documents that typically require wet signatures as loan papers, closing documents. Under the pandemic, by the way, that's been changing. And documents that used to have to be signed with a notary and wet signature, technology is adapting to that. We're even seeing that documents that signed in embassies and foreign countries are being done digitally with some new software. So it's a fast changing world. Foreclosures, contracts and certain documents that are in foreclosure sales, bank-owned properties, those have to be wet signatures. So even if you want to be entirely digital, in most cases, you're going to come across transactions in which you still have to put pen to ink. You're also going to have clients that are not adept at these tools. They're not even immigrants to technology. They are on an island from technology. So you need to be able to navigate both. One of the ways, by the way, to do that is to have your tools with you at a house, because you may want to change a document while you're meeting with a client, and you can actually physically send them the document there and have them sign it. For a while, we actually had tablets where you could sign them there, and I'm not seeing those tools there. There were some problems with them. Okay, so a little note here is that this is our best practice integration right now. So Zipform's integration with Docusign is our current best practice. You will find in the future that we will be shifting you over to creating your documents inside of Command using the enhanced Docusign's rooms within Command, which you already have access to for compliance. And of course, the storage will be within Command. But we find that right now, the build out isn't as fluid, and the access for the BIC is not as fluid as it is in this. So I don't know, Carrie, do we have a timeline when we think that might happen? Do you think it's 2022 timeframe?
It kind of is more of just our use. And we can do more classes around it because basically it's all connected.
Yeah.
Zipform's Docusign room to command, and then it's all, everything we need to do is there.
For those of you that are really new in the business, one of the beauties of using this version of Zipforms is it's easy for me to go into your account as an admin. And with some of you, I've done this. I can actually fill out the computer or fill out the forms in front of you on a Zoom call, or watch you do it and kind of say, do this, do that, click here, click that, especially as the integration with Docusign, that's become really important. Okay, so here are the simple steps we're going to go through to ensure that we have smooth sailing and working with these. Number one, we're going to call it the know before you go, and that's our preparation steps. The second one is we're going to do a one-time setup that you should never have to change again unless addresses, phone numbers, or license numbers change, like if you get a broker's license instead of a salesperson's license. And then we're going to talk about how you start right each and every time you start a new envelope for a client or new folder for a client. So here's the first part in preparation. We need to make sure you know how to get into your Keller Williams provided Docusign account. Is there anybody that doesn't know what that is? Carrie, we may need your help on this. Is everybody good on their Docusign account? We're going to find out pretty soon when we do the setup. Okay, the next one is we need to make sure that you know your login ID and password for your Zipform account. And that's the one where we can set them up. Okay, here's what we're going to do. So that's the first step, is just knowing your two logins. I'm going to share my screen and we're going to go into Zipform.
I'm on standby to kick out a password reset email if you need to. And while Lisa's logging in, just a note, I see a couple of people on the Zoom and in here that are on a team. Use this. You guys all have an individual Zipform account, and use it to practice. But for the most part, with transactions, you're probably going to use your team leader's Zipform, and then team members all use that same one.
Okay, here's our first step. So in the upper right-hand corner, and I got to move some things around here so I can see them. In your upper right-hand corner, you're going to see a Me button. You are not seeing my current screen, are you?
No.
Okay, we're going to share the whole one and this should work better. Okay, so now you should see up here where it says Me? Click on that and you have pictures on your handout. And this box will open up. This is your profile box. You're going to click on Profile and Settings. And the first thing I want you to do is make sure that your name, it should already have been in there, but make sure your name is in there and spelled correctly. The email address is a required field. The phone number is not a required field, but I recommend you put it in there. This is the office fax number. I don't know where it goes. It's a great question. We haven't used it. If you choose to take it off, I'm fine with that. And then the one that will not be on there automatically is your license number. So it's either going to be RB or RS. And I think for everybody on this call, it's probably RS hyphen and your 5 digits. So go ahead and make sure that's in there. And then you're going to click Save at the upper left-hand corner. Now, the other thing to note that you should set up here is there is an email signature. And you can type it in yourself. Frankly, you should be able to copy your Keller Williams email signature and copy it into this with a copy and paste, and then save it as well. But just as a reminder, your email communications need to have your license number and your brokerage name on there. So I just put in a very simple one. As a reminder of the BIC requirements that I have on all of you, please don't send me your documents from Zipform. And I suggest you don't do that with your clients either, because with some of you, it'll create a header text, just a whole bunch of gobbledygook that comes across on a device. It looks very unprofessional. There are cases when it makes sense to send it via email, but you do want to learn how to move these documents around in PDF versions, package them nicely when you send off an offer to another, an agent for an offer presentation. So that'll be a skill set you want to build in. Any questions on what we've covered so far? Is everybody up to speed on all of that? Are you reading the chat? Can you see the chat? We good? Okay, so you're going to save that. The next thing you're going to go over to is the settings, 5 steps over. But before we go there, let me point out a couple of things. In sign-in and security, so I just want to walk through these. This is where you can reset your own password. But again, you would have to been logged in to do that. And you can set up 2-factor authentication, which means every time you sign in, you're going to have to get a digit code and put it in from your phone or from your email. Offices, you cannot edit. That's an administrative piece. Your forms section will show you what libraries you have access to. In most of these cases, these are things that we've given you that we have access to on an administrative level. And you can change your colors if you want, if you happen to geek out on that. Products, again, things that we've given you access to. You can, by the way, purchase. Let me go back to that. There are products that you can purchase at an additional price. I had done, last year I had purchased a connection to NAR RPR. So where that's helpful is if you want to be able to pull data on a listing and import it directly into Zipforms. I think it costs like $13 or $14 a year. It's pretty inexpensive. So if I'm, for me, even listing one property, it was helpful for me. But if I'm listing multiple properties, I like that link to RPR. It just imports a lot of data a lot easier. But here's where we're going to is settings. And you can alter your notification settings for when documents come in and go out. So you can set those up as well. But the only two we're dealing with today is the first one about me and the settings. So now across this board, everybody's is probably going to look a little bit different. Everybody should have the second one clicked, the radio button that says DocuSign clicked, and it should already say, if you're already set up, it'll say unlinked DocuSign account. If you have it set up for a personal DocuSign account that you're paying for, and you want to switch it to your Keller Williams free account, you're going to need to unlink and then link the Keller Williams account. So switch over from Digital Ink, click on DocuSign, and go through your login. And then let us know how you're doing it. Carrie's going to monitor that. And this is where we may need to do some.
Some of these might need some help on the KW Honolulu DocuSign account.
Yeah, so I think what we want to do too is everybody on the call up to speed with this, because otherwise we'll show you where you get your account set up. You also want to make sure you have your account linked to command. And here's what the distinction is going to be. Your DocuSign Rooms account, your DocuSign account, it's the same account, just has two different front-facing looks. It has to be linked to your command for it to work with compliance and have DocuSign Rooms. It has to be linked with Zipforms for there to be this handshaking that goes on between the two apps. Okay, does anybody need help or are we all good?
I have a question. I
Okay.
do not press unlinked DocuSign account, correct?
If you're linked, do not press it. If it looks like mine, leave it the way it is. Okay, is everybody
Got
good?
it. Thank you.
Okay, good. Then I am going to save this.
Lisa,
Yes.
I missed
that mine?
something because the Zoom was cutting out for a while and I couldn't hear anything, but I don't know how you got to that section where you are in the Zipform site.
Okay. Are you at the About Me page that I showed a minute ago? So we clicked on Me in the upper right-hand corner when you log into Zipforms, and then you click on Profile and Settings. And then the fifth selection right here at the top, Mike, see where it says Settings? You're going to select that, and this window will open. Did you find it?
Still looking for it.
Okay,
I
what do you
was able
see
to
on your?
find, yeah, I was able to find Profile and Settings and click that, but
Okay, what's showing on
Okay.
your screen right now? Are you good?
yes, okay, now I found Settings.
Okay, and then click on DocuSign, or is it already clicked?
Clicked on it.
And it's gonna tell you to log in to your DocuSign account, correct? I almost want to unlink mine so I can show them, but I'm afraid.
Unless you, as long as you get logged in.
It doesn't say that.
Okay, I'm taking it back out. So everybody should see it now the way it would look if you didn't have it linked. So link existing DocuSign account. By the way, you see where it says get DocuSign subscription? You don't want to get a subscription there that way because you're going to pay for that one. reset up your account inside of Command for you to get a free one. Okay, so what happens if you say link existing DocuSign account is the DocuSign window is going to open up. And this is where you need to know what your login is. And I'm going to autofill mine for your Keller Williams login. Mine's all on autosave with my finger, so my print. So that's how you link up. If it was your first time linking and you had never activated your DocuSign account, it would go through an authentication. It's going to send you a note to your cell phone, and it's going to go through, I think, a 5 or 4 digit number that you put in to get there, and then it will link. Okay, I'm going to move forward. Are we good? Okay, so again, you save.
Not gonna leave this page just here, right?
Do you want me?
Scroll down really quickly. Keep going, keep going.
Oh, this is good. Rosa, you see where it says link to my other transactions, Zipform edition accounts? If you have other,
Let's see.
do you see right here, link to my other transactions on my screen that I'm sharing?
Hang on, let me look. I'm looking at my screen. Link to my other transactions. Okay, is this on the same?
So if you have another, and everybody in here has an HAR account or HBR
Oh,
account.
yes.
So this is where
Got it.
you could link to that other account. Okay.
And at that point, once you link them, you'll be able to have, you'll sign it in one place, but you'll be able to toggle back and forth and make sure that you're in the one that you want to use.
By the way, I have this,
Alright.
it's interesting here is because I had purchased last year, the RPR link, the account, which I haven't paid for this year, I have a link for single sign-on. So that it'll connect the RPR account to here. And again, if you don't know what RPR is, Realtor Property Resource, it's an NAR initiative that was really in reaction to Zillow to make sure that we were aggregating all of the information that we get from all of our MLSs and boards of realtors, and that we're creating a database of property information for you to access. And it just gets bigger and bolder all the time. But you're able to produce reports out of it. You guys are able to go and search for properties in other cities and states. Let's say you have somebody moving from another area and you want to find out like a value on their house and what the bedrooms and baths and what it looks like, you can do it there. Okay, are we good here? Carrie, we can move on?
I'm not
Okay,
quite
for the-
sure what the link to my, I see it, what you're talking about, but
Don't worry about
The
it
only
now. We're
account-
just showing you it's,
Yeah.
we're just, yeah, you're probably fine. That's just to let you know if somebody wants to, we'll go back to it. We're not going to cover it today, but just know it's there from an awareness
Okay.
standpoint. Okay, so
Gotcha.
that
Thank you.
takes us through the first 2 pages of your outline and actually the top of the third. Okay, now we're going to go to creating a transaction. And we're going to go through the signing piece. So I'm going to create a new transaction and I'm going to talk through all 3 pieces of this at once. Let's suggest that, I need somebody to find me a listing number because I didn't do that. Somebody find a 2021 number for me on MLS. I'm going to start a new purchase or offer, and I want to walk you through some things that are extremely important.
Any listing?
Yeah.
I have
Just
one.
a-
Lisa.
Okay, hang on a second till I'm ready for it. I'm going to walk you through these stages. So the first thing is, I'm going to talk about naming conventions and status. I'm going to suggest that if we start with a proper naming convention for our files, it will keep things organized much later on when you've got a lot of files inside of your Zipform transactions. It'll be easier to find and go back to, but these also will show up in some of the emails and naming conventions. So you don't want to put things in there that would be embarrassing if your client saw them. My typical format would be this. I separate buyers from sellers. By the way, do not keep all the forms by client. And here's what I mean by that. Don't create a Sam Smith folder and then put their purchase and sale documents in the same one, because the parties that are in there are different in the 2 transactions, and it will start to cross-integrate in the forms and you'll end up with errors. So every time you make an offer for a client, you're going to do one of 2 things. You're either going to create a new envelope for them or a new folder for them, or you're going to copy over the information and stay in the same folder. It all depends. That's up to you. But if you do that and change the address. So you can either have 2 different folders for them. Let's say you have a client that you write 4 offers for. You're either going to have one that you keep changing, or you're going to have 4 separate ones. If they're also listing a property with you, keep that in a separate one. There are certain documents that you only have access to once in a transaction. And if you use it once, you can't pull it into another transaction, into that same transaction, I mean. Okay, so I say buyer. And then let's say it's, let's call it John and Leslie Smith. And who's going to give me the property that we're going to write on?
It is
Amanda, give me the address.
94-1013 Kaiamu, K-A-I-A-M-U
KAIAMU. Okay.
Street.
Okay, so now I have my name in. Over here, I'm going to click on MLS Connect. But before I do that, let me finish all of this. Is this a condo or is it residential?
Residential.
Single family. Okay, so I'm going to click on residential. And at this point, I'm going to call it active. Once we get into escrow, I'm going to call it pending. If we don't get it in transaction, I'm going to change the status to inactive. If we get into escrow and it falls through, I'm going to mark it as fallen through. Okay. Mine looks a little bit different because I can change agents here. So I'm now going to click on MLS Connect. And this is an integration to the multiple listing service that will pull in information, save you a ton of time rather than handwriting this in. So you want to make sure you're in the right category. So if you're writing something on lots and land, you need to switch or multifamily or commercial. So I'm in residential, and Amanda, give me the MLS number.
2012-679.
That's it?
Oh, sorry,
Oh.
2021267998.
Okay, so there's the MLS number. I'm going to click that I want the photos included, and I click on find, and you'll see the information pull from the MLS and populate the transaction. And I say, yes, I want to use this listing. And then I go down to the bottom and click save. Okay, the document opens up, and this all appears now in the summary page where all of the information has been pulled correctly from the MLS. Now, interesting here is notice it says the parcel number here, but here's what we're going to look at next. We're going to go back to that in a second. You're going to have to clean up some things. Next thing is go to parties. The other place that I find we make mistakes in this and we slow everything down is we want to start by building our parties. If we're pulling a listing from another broker, it automatically fills in the listing agent. If there are two listing agents on the property, then it's not going to populate all of it correctly. You will also typically need to go in and pull their license number off of the multiple listing service. If there's two agents, and I'm just going to make this up, okay? So let's say it's RS12345 for Brian Teal. So I'm going to pull that from the MLS, and let's say there's a second agent, and that agent is an RB12345. That's how I would put in both. And let's say their 5-digit MLS ID, let's say it's 55555, and this broker's name is Sue Smith. Okay, I'm not going to change their emails on this. Okay, but that's how I would add two agents.
Did that automatically for the listing brokerage? Did it automatically?
That all came from MLS, but will not pull the two agents.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So I'm going to delete that because it's not there, but it's all saved there. I don't need to save it again. Now on the listing brokerage, we don't need to fill in anything on the bottom when it's not us. Okay. But now here's what we need to do. We're going to click on the buy side. And here's where agents get confused. When you represent the buyer, you are called the selling broker.
Yeah.
Listing broker is a listing broker. And I know that always stumps you guys, but the selling broker is the party that sells the listing on behalf of their buyer. So we're going to click and we're going to add selling broker. And I'm going to do this as if Chad is my broker, because usually I do have him sign. So you're going to put in your name here. I'm not sure why it didn't automatically, but. And my agent ID, it'd be nice if I spelled my own name right. So this is your 4-digit MLS ID. Okay, you need to make sure your email address is in here. This is critical to work with Docusign. All of this other stuff will populate on your forms and you should put it in there, but it doesn't need to be there. Once you fill it in once, all of this information will show up and you can automatically populate it by clicking on the arrows on the right. So for instance, here, I should be able to just click on it and my pull-down menu will show what I've used before. Bottom below selling brokerage is very critical. It's one of the most critical steps for this to work well with DocuSign. So you're going to click the firm name. You're going to add in our brokerage number, which is RB21303. And then this is the other really important place. So you need to put your broker in charge's name here. So usually it's going to be me with you guys. But in this case, if I'm having Chad as my BIC, I'm going to put Chad in. The office ID for us, if you're attached to the Pilani office, is KWPP. If you're attached to one of the other offices, know your MLS ID. You can search yourself within the multiple listing. When you do search agent and then put your name in, it will tell you which office you're affiliated with. Where this
Lisa.
shows up, yes, ma'am.
Why did you put Chad name? We're not gonna put your name anymore? Or
You will put my name on yours, but when I write a contract, I have Chad review mine.
okay, got it.
So good question. I'm writing this, if I'm writing this for me as an agent, I'm going to have Chad sign mine, but you guys would put me in. In
Okay.
which case, let me do this that way. It's a good point. So if I'm your BIC, you're going to put in lctorres@kw.com. And that is the critically important piece to have this work on this side. And then you're going to go to the bottom and click save. Okay, so the two critical pieces is your name and email address, broker information, MLS ID, and your broker in charge's email address and name. Okay, so we have those filled in. So notice now on the buy side, we have the broker. Now you're going to add your buyers in. Same thing here. So I'm just going to make this very simple. Samuel, I forget what I said the buyer's name was.
John and Leslie Smith.
John, and let's say the middle name is Ian. Nice Irish name. And let's say it's John Smith at Gmail. Okay, so they both need to have their email addresses in. I'm only going to set up one of the buyers for now, just for time purposes.
But can I have a question?
Uh-huh.
If it's like a couple and the husband is the one who's doing the mortgage, does the order really matter?
It's a great question. The order doesn't matter so much. I mean, I think the order has a emotional
Yeah, I know.
context for, like, I as a female, I get annoyed that they always put the man first. So in my experience as the breadwinner, I was the one that was making sure the mortgage went through, but I found that mortgage and title companies were always putting the husband first, and it annoyed me. So that may be something to realize. It may annoy your client when you do that with the contract. If there is a couple and only one is going on the mortgage and the lender tells you to only put one of them on the mortgage, then you're not gonna have the wife anyway. You're not gonna have, or vice versa.
No, but I meant for like the purchase contract.
That's what I'm talking about.
Oh.
This is your purchase contract. This is gonna populate your purchase.
Be both of them in the title.
If it's both of them, then you're going to have two of these set up. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Okay. So I have John Ian Smith. Now in Hawaii, we have two recording systems, right? We have regular system and land court. Land court is a Torrens system. In a Torrens system, the state is actually guaranteeing that the title has been vetted. And with very few exceptions, they require full names. So it just makes sense when you're writing offers for a buyer that you know your buyer's full name. And it also makes sense when you're creating the offer that you look at the appropriate place in the Hawaii Information System printout, which is under sales, and you find the exact legal name of the seller. Okay, and I'm going to talk about that if we have time, and I'm going to show you the seller portion. Okay, so hang on a sec, we'll go to that. For a second here, let's assume that you go to Hawaii Information Service and you find out that a seller, now I'm looking at the buyer now. Well, let's just say this is the buyer. Say the buyer is paying cash and they're buying it in their trust. And the trust is the John and Leslie Smith Revocable Living Trust. Then you're going to put their names down here as a signing representative, and they're going to be a trustee. Now, where this really matters is with corporate purchases, LLCs, you'll see this. So having the right buyer or seller on the purchase contract is important, and understanding the difference between an individual and an entity. So if Kerry owns his house is his personal name, let's say he and his wife own it in their name, those are individuals. If Carrie and his wife have one or two trusts or more trusts that they put it in, then the trusts own it. The individuals do not own it. It's an entity owner. And the entity owner has signers that are named in the document. In a trust, they're called trustees. In a revocable living trust means you can revoke it during your lifetime and it becomes irrevocable once the parties pass away. Once the parties in a living trust pass away, the trust document will name who is the signing authority upon their passing. So it's called a surviving trustee if it's the spouse, or oh, my brain might have just gone. So anyway, they'll have a surviving trustee or a substitute trustee that comes in upon their death, and that's who will sign it. Any questions on any of that? Okay, we're going to save it.
I have
And
a
this-
quick question
Okay.
that kind of goes off what Maya was saying. So if the husband is the only one on the loan, can the wife still have her name on the house, or does it have to only be the husband?
You have to ask the lender.
Okay.
Depends on states, it depends on the lender. So you should know that ahead of time. Okay, so again, with buyer number 2, I put her in here, I make sure her email is in here and I save it. If I go to all parties now, I have John Smith, Leslie Smith, listing agent is here and the selling agent is here. When you go into the purchase contract and fill in the escrow holder, it will automatically add them as a service provider. So you'll start to fill these out. What I don't have on the sell side is the seller. So if I go into this listing and I see, I'm just going to make this up. I see that it is John H. Smith that's getting, or we already have Smith as a buyer. Let's say it's Brent Bascom. Brent B. Bascom is where the tax bill is sent. I want to look further down on the HIS printout and see what the deed transfer was. And it might be Brian. I just used one of my classmates' names. Now on the seller, I'm not representing the seller. I don't have their email, and you are never going to send DocuSign across the brokerage wall unless the other broker asks you to. So in other words, you do not ever send a DocuSign to the other broker's client unless they say, I'm in Hawaii, it's okay, could you please send it to them? By the way, there is a way to put a stopgap in there so that they have a chance to review it first before it would go on to them. And it's one of the intricacies of learning DocuSign. We'll get to that when we do a digital signature.
So if this is a trust, the seller was also a trust, you would put the.
Yeah, I would just make this work. By the way, there's a trick here. If you have like 4 sellers or 4 buyers, you have to kind of mush it into the names. And by the way, you can add it as additional buyers over here where it says like there's 4 sellers, but it's a little bit harder to work it on the document. You would put the trust name in here. So I might put in first name John and in middle name Smith and then in last name Revocable Living Trust. It'll print out correctly. By the way, if you fill it in on the document itself, it'll backfill into this. Okay, so I save that. And let's say that's my only seller. Okay, so now I'm just going to go into documents and I'm going to practice on a document. Is everybody with me so far?
Lisa, I have a question. So thanks to you, I'm really familiar with all of that, but I have a question that I want to know. So every transaction that I have, there is any way that it's going to be like a template that I don't need to, to do it every transaction?
Once you type these things in, they will show up in those drop-down menus, so you won't have to type them in every single time. So like your broker, the brokerage license number, all of that will be accessible in that little arrow. So if I go back, let me show you.
Yeah, that's for my personal name, I know, for my, but what about like, I remember that I always needed to add again, the seller broker.
You shouldn't have, I should be in your system once you've done it on that computer.
Okay.
I don't know if it saves it native on your computer or if it saves it in the cloud, but you should find that if you click on here. So if you notice when I click on here, I have all different people saved here, different people that I've typed in. So it should be accessible to this little arrow pull down menu.
Okay.
Okay, so now I'm going to click over to documents. So I'm moving from left to right. And I'm going to pull in a couple of documents just so you see how this works. So we're going to put in the purchase contract. Here's how you know that you're in the Keller Williams version. When I click up here under Forms Libraries, you'll see that the Keller Williams library shows up here. In Rosa's case, if she clicks here, it'd be interesting to see if she sees the California Association of Realtors, any other library she had, and she probably has a Keller Williams library from California as well, the Keller Williams Honolulu. So these are libraries that you can subscribe to based upon your affiliations. In this system, you should be seeing Hawaii Association, High Central, Hawaii Information Service, and Keller Williams. By the way, this is a problem I have happen over and over again. Do not use the Hawaii Information Service library. I have had a number of cases where agents get listings and they fill out the listing agreements using the HIS library. Those are for the Big Island. The clue is that if it asks you what volcano zone it's in, it's the wrong island, okay? And we're working with a purchase. So I'm in here, and if I don't want to scroll all the way down through the documents, I've got a choice. I can just type part of the name in. By the way, you can also say, give me all libraries at once, and then I could put in purchase. And it's going to go right to, but see, now I get all of them, right? I get the commercial purchase contract. So I want the regular purchase contract. And then let's say I want the standard addendum. Now we need many more documents in a transaction folder, but I'm just going to start with those. And if I click back on the white spot, I see those two purchase or those two agreements. Here's the organize button. If you want to move around the order of things, you can organize, and I can move these around and then stop organizing, and it locks them. Well, it didn't, it locked it back. Forget it. I didn't say that. Okay. First thing you're going to do when you get into a document is do an error correct. The first error correct I want you to know is that in a computer language, leading zeros don't exist. In a TMK number, they do exist. So the transaction map key for this one, or the tax map key, I mean, should have a 0. And it's a single family, so it's 4 zeros. I don't care if you leave this blank because it's an if applicable. But your tax map key format, the first thing I want to see you correct is so that it's 1 digit, 1 digit, 1 digit, 3 digits, 3 digits, 4 digits. That saves me one thing that I have to email back to and say, fix this. Okay, and then now you're simply going to start filling it in. Once you filled this in another form, all of this stuff will start to be there for pull down menus. And so I can just merely pull down ones that already exist instead of typing it in. Okay, so let's go back and see what we've done. We've done MLS Connect because it pulls in information from the MLS. It prevents you from making typo errors on the tax map key, the address, the seller's name, and the listing agent information, right? And it fills in a lot of additional information into your folder. We have covered by making sure you use the parties, and that for everybody that's on your side of the transaction, you put in their email address, and that will link you up to Docusign when you do the handshake. We also talked about how you format your files in terms of the naming convention and the status, and that will group them when you're in your dashboard. When you have 3 or 4 folders, it's not going to matter. When you have 300 or 400, it will matter. You'll be able to find them a lot faster. Okay, so let's just pretend that this document has been filled out, and I'm going to save it.
Go all the way down to page 14.
Yeah.
Before you,
Sure.
You're going to exit out. Just wanted to check something. So you see where it pre-filled with some of the parties. I would suggest in addition, so if you're looking up the license number for Brian Teal, I would grab his eXp Realty, and in his parties, I would put the brokerage license number in there as well. And for our brokerage, right, the address, we got the license number, but put in the address and contact phone number for the brokerage as well. That would keep you from having a fully executed purchase contract. And it's one of the most common mistakes that we see in all of the purchase contracts coming back is having those little pieces of information, right? And you don't want to leave a loophole should your buyer be unhappy a year from the purchase and you really don't have anything that's fully executed.
Yeah, and unfortunately, this is not one of the places that autofills for some reason, and I don't know why. There's got to be a way of fixing this, right? We aren't going through filling out forms in this class, but that is one of the things that will hink you up. You know, obviously we want to make sure you fill out everything fully. And when I review your file, I do go look and make sure you have all that information in. The other place, by the way, where having the correct brokerage information comes in, whenever we're dealing across brokerage firms, we have what's called a cooperating brokerage firm separate contract. And that is, you know, technically many places have gotten away from using that form, but let me pull it in and show it to you. This is the document that's a contract not between buyer and seller. That's why it says it's a separate contract. It's between Keller Williams and EXP in this file. And it's a contract for EXP to pay Keller Williams the commission that they offered in the multiple listing service. Now, under NAR rules, they owe it anyway. But it is the business convention in Honolulu that we fill this form out. So you'll need to make sure, again, you have the purchase contract reference date. So if we're filling out to date, you'll need to fill out all this information in section 1, check the box in 6. And this is the other place that Carrie's letting you know that also needs to be filled out correctly, that isn't auto-populating from the MLS. You need to make sure that the brokerage firm license number comes across. You need to make sure that your site is filled in, the address is in there, et cetera. So the place that this brokerage information is going to show up and not be complete is in the bottom of page 14 on the purchase contract and the bottom of the co-op agreement.
So definitely take a look at filling out that in the parties and then just making sure that it's pulling everything over.
Where do we check for number 6?
We are a corporation, so you check the second one. And you always want to make sure you put in, so let's say in the multiple listing service, it said 3%. I'll see people just put 3% in. 3% of what? 3% of what?
Sales.
3% of the children's bank account in the second bedroom?
Sales price, and then whether
3% of final sales price. Now, here's a lot of brokers are a stickler. My opinion is if you just say 3% of final sales price, that's the compensation. But many brokers will come back to you and say they want to say no GET, no general excise tax. When you are dealing with another broker, I'm fine with you using GET. When you're dealing with a client, like in the listing agreement, spell out general excise tax. Don't put GET. Because they can always argue, I don't know what that is. You used an acronym. I'm not paying it. Okay, but this is between brokers, we know, and the MLS says it. Okay, so it's going to be like that, and we'll fill out the rest of this. Good question. Okay, let's go back. Final step in all this now where you're going to see the magic, the way it works, is we're going to go e-sign up here on the left and new. Those are the two most important steps to start a handshake between Zipforms and Docusign. Now you're going to pick the documents that are going to go in this envelope for signature. I may choose to send the co-op form separate to my broker to sign and not send it to my buyer, and that's fine. I'm okay if you include it. Okay, so I'm going to do this because I'll get more signatures. I say close, and this page pops up. I don't necessarily want to go to my client saying e-sign packet. So I might say offer on, I think it was, I forget the name of it.
What's the address?
Back on the starting page. I'm just gonna put that, doesn't matter. It's set with the signing service to Docusign. If on an outlier event I wanted to change it here, I could again, but it's automatically reading that setting that I put in under profile and settings, and it's automatically picking Docusign as a signing service. I would have the ability to go to digital ink. I'm not going to. Now I get to include the documents I want. There's automatically goes into a return folder automatically, and I'll show you that. I won't show you that on this one. I can add documents to include here from outside of the folder. You know, if I want to pull something from my computer that's a PDF, I can do that here. But in this case, I'm pulling these 3. If, by the way, they came across and I don't like the order of the documents, I can change them here. Okay, so maybe I want to put the cooperating broker in a separate place. So you're just going to drag these little handlebars, the little crosses. Okay, that's the order I want. I click next. Okay, so I'm writing the offer. Who do I want to sign this? My broker. And I have me in both places, right? The point of this is if I had left it with Chad as my BIC, you would have seen Chad's email here and mine.
You don't have to choose yourself, right?
Oh, correct. But right now my problem is, okay, so it's selling broker. Yeah, because I don't sign anything. And I will automatically get a copy anyway. But let's say you had another party in here, you wanted to send it to you and select them. So I'm just going to select my broker and my buyers, buyer 1 and buyer 2. I close it. And you get a signing order. If I take signing order off, it goes to everybody at the same time. If I put signing order on, then I can either number them or I can drag them. Numbers are here, dragging is here. My preference is, unless you're given permission by your BIC, send it to the BIC first. If we catch a problem in it, we can reject it or call you and say, redo it before it goes to your client. Because if your client signs it first and then I reject it, it makes you look bad. So I'm the BIC, I go first. I recommend if you're sending it to a husband and wife or parties on a transaction together, make their signing order the same. I learned this the hard way because here's what happens. Let's say, in fact, you had this happen. We had yours, Badma, in an order and the husband was in a meeting until 5 o'clock. And what happens is if you have the signing order where it goes 1, 2, 3, we had it where he was number 2 and the wife was number 3. She's like, where is it? Where is it? Where is it? He had to sign it first before it would go to her. Okay, so you want to put that signing order in, and then I go next. Now the handshake between Zipforms and Docusign happens, and notice what happens at the top of the page. So you get the Docusign link, and you've now been transported into a different software package. That's the hands-on, that's the handoff and the link. So notice Zipforms is in the background and now Docusign's in the front. That's the handshake. Because I put all the parties in now, what you'll notice that happens is everything's pre-populated at the bottom. If I forwarded these documents into Docusign separately, I would have to add all of these signatures and dates on the bottom of every page.
How is yours automatically already signed?
Because I linked them.
Oh, okay.
That's the magic of linking. Yeah, that means you didn't have it all in there. That's the beauty of putting their email address into the parties at the beginning, is it automatically populates it. Now the documents that will not automatically populate is the broker signatures and the signatures on any PDFs that you brought in. That also means that once another party has sent it to you as a PDF and you're bringing it in, you're going to have to hand drag those signatures and dates. Yeah, if you do it this way at the outset of writing an offer or taking a listing, they'll pre-populate. Now imagine if you did it the way Badma is saying, and you didn't set up those parties the way I showed you, and I go through, let's look at the number of pages in a typical offer. You have a 14-page offer, you have the co-op, you have the standard addendum, the ABA, you have an as-is addendum, you probably have a lead paint. So we have 14 plus 9, we have 23 pages that have multiple signatures. What if I had 4 buyers? I'm now dragging, I don't know, 100 signature lines. It'll take you easily a half an hour. And you send it to your BIC and I say, Badma, you made a mistake. You didn't have me sign the top of page 1, rejected. Now she has to go back and drag 100 again. Imagine how much time that wastes if I reject it 3 times. Or your client says, oh no, remember you were supposed to change the price, reject it. Start over, go back in, change it, create a new document folder. So we literally, by following these 4 steps, can save hours on a single transaction, either with you or your TC, TM, or your assistant. Okay, so now the ones we have to add, the way we add these is you have a toggle screen up here where you click on the name and you can change it back and forth to whoever needs to sign. In this case, we want your broker. So we drag Lisa's signature to the top. The best convention on this is it says sign, arrow, and then it has an underline. Make that little underline line up with the signature line that it's going to on the left-hand side. And that will start the signature at that point on the line. Everybody understand what I mean?
You gotta be careful where you place them.
Yeah, because if you put it up here, right? Yeah, and I'm picky. Or if you put it over here, right, it's going to overprint. So I drag it right there. And then you just merely check every page and see that it's in the right place. Now let me get it back to normal size. And you want to check everything. You can check everything by either being on the page, or you can click on this little handle here and you can scroll down this way. Make sure everything's signature where it's supposed to be. I'm going to get down to the bottom of page 1. Notice if I click on the document on the right-hand side, the document shows up, and you can go page by page and actually double click. So I'm going to go straight to page 14, and I'm going to double click on that page, and page 14 is going to appear. I want to show you page 14 for a couple of reasons. First of all, please do not place a date in this. This is supposed to represent the date that your client signs it, not the date you typed into it. So don't put a date in that. The second thing is it automatically populates with a date next to every signature. My preference is if it's a single buyer, I move the signature date up to here on the form. If it's 2 buyers, then I want to be able to authenticate when each person signed it. Let me take a time out for a second and tell you something I didn't tell you at the beginning. To be a legally enforceable signature, the company that's providing the service has to create a log of when the signatures were signed and by who, to what IP address, what email address. So in the very beginning, I said, you have to be very careful. I've heard clients say, well, can't you just send them both? I'm going to be busy. Send both of them to my husband sign. I mean, after all, they're digital signatures. That's fraud. That is no different than forging a signature. It's a misrepresentation. So you've now violated the law by helping commit a fraud. Number 2 is you have a duty under the Code of Ethics for fair and honest dealing with all parties. So you've broken the Code of Ethics because now you're representing to the other party that the husband and wife or whatever signed this and they didn't, one party signed it, right? And you know from your transaction, husband and wife do things differently. At the beginning, they may all be on the same page and later on they're not. So don't ever do that. And you will get a document log that comes back to you at the end of signing, and it comes into your Docusign envelope, and it's called a summary, and it will show you the time and date that every person signed and what email address it was. So if you sent John Smith and Susie Smith to the same email address, both the jsmith@gmail.com, it's going to show that. And if there's a lawsuit or some other issue that comes, they will be able to subpoena your file, and they can actually subpoena it from Docusign. And they'll be able to see that there was a fraud committed. So not only is it wrong to do it, but it's easily provable.
Can you scroll up to like one of the initials?
Mhm.
Like, you know how there it only gives you one date sign?
Yeah, on the bottoms, they just automatically
Is that
populate
okay?
on that. It's fine. Yeah. Yeah, it's absolutely fine. It's because what's going to create this as a contract is when you deliver it to the other side and they sign it and return it. So you have delivery as when the contract is. So one signature is fine, or one date is fine, I mean. Okay, this one, because it was no longer a PDF and it's native into the software, it's automatically going to put your client's signatures here as well because you populated it. If you pulled the document in as a PDF, you would have to drag the signatures for those parties over. Okay, so the other place that my signature is as broker is here. In a standard offer, as long as we are using the COVID addendum, which is currently a broker requirement, your client can say, no, I want to not use it, but we have to offer it. It also needs my signature as the BIC on the top, or whoever your BIC is. So that means if it's 2 different brokerage firms, 3 signatures, top of the contract, bottom of the co-op, and the top of the COVID. So if you don't see 3 of your broker's signatures, it's going to get rejected and sent back. Now, if it's dual agency, same thing, because the dual agency document needs to be signed, but there won't be a co-op, right? Because there's not a cooperating commission between 2 brokers. It's all paid in-house. You don't use a co-op, but we do have a dual agency addendum, disclosure and addendum, okay? And then we have the purchase contract. Okay. Any questions?
Yeah, going back to the signing and fraud. What if the buyers are a couple and they happen to be at the same computer and they happen to sign at the same time?
They have to have 2 separate email addresses.
Okay.
So that's a legal requirement. And if your clients come to you in the very beginning, and I've actually had this happen, they say, oh, we have one family email. You have to say, I'm sorry, you need to create another email account.
So as
No,
long
but
as
we do
that,
it this way. I'm sorry, I can't send 2 signatures to the same email. In fact, I think there's safeguards built in the system now that it won't allow it. It still allows, I think it's built in now. In the very beginning, it wasn't, and so that's why.
You need
yeah.
2 separate emails.
So it's easy. You say, you know what, let's just go into Gmail and you can create a new account. Or iCloud if you're a Mac user, so that's how you handle that. For this transaction, let's create a new account. Great question. By the way, if you made a mistake or you need to add somebody that gets a copy, once you're in Docusign, now remember, you're no longer in Zipforms. So once you're in Docusign, you can go to Actions and you can edit the recipients here. So you see needs to sign Lisa. So imagine that, remember, I almost made the mistake of including me as both the selling agent as well as the broker. If I had done that, I will show up twice here. All I need to do is I can either delete the person by hitting the trash can, or I could change it. Instead of needs to sign, I could just say receives a copy, and that wouldn't stall the signing. The things that will stall the signing in order, remember when we went back to the signing order 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? The things that will stall it is if they need to sign or if they need to view. So let's say that Mai is writing a contract and getting it signed by John and Susie Smith, and the mother-in-law is giving the money, and the mother-in-law says they're not allowed to sign until I see it. I don't think that was ever a case that would happen, but she could say, that's no problem. I'll send it that you have to receive a copy, and if you decline it, it will stop. So those are things that will cause it to stall, is a need to view or needs to sign. Receives a copy, they will receive a copy in the order that they're put in the signing order. So for example, if I have a co-agent on this, but I'm doing all the signing and I want them to be able to see it right out of the bat, I'll set them up as number 1 with the broker. Okay, so I can edit all these here. So I'm going to say done. And then once you click send, I'm not going to do this because I have false email addresses in here.
Can you also show, like how you type things?
Oh, sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like text.
Okay. So, yeah, in fact, we're going to go ahead and let me do questions and we're going to do the lead, because I think that's the important one on this. This was not intended to be a class where we do filling out the forms, but there's an important one. Since we talked about filling out the bottom, there's an important one, and it can, it's a little finer tool with this, a little harder to use. Let me stop at this point and see, does anybody have questions with any of this? I mean, I know it's boring stuff. It's like watching paint dry. I think that's still her hand up from before.
It's super geeky and super cool.
It's super geeky, but it's also one of the things that you can quickly do. I can literally do all of this in like 6 minutes, 7 minutes. And now, you see Bodma going, oh, wait, I had to like drag those every one.
Yeah.
I know, because I'm on the other side going, I really want to have my glass of Chardonnay and move on with my evening. Why is she not sending me this? And it's like 30 minutes later, what are you doing? I'm still dragging signatures. Oh, we need to have this class. So
In addition to, maybe not a question. Oh,
First, when you put the email addresses and it's gonna automatically populate.
yeah, it automatically, if you put the email addresses in parties,
Yeah.
it transfers. So
I
here's
did
what
not do it
happens.
first time, that's why it was annoying.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you don't have the email address, and then remember on one of your clients, we had the wrong email address and they never got it. So we had that happen too. That's where you can go in and edit recipients and fix the email address. Okay, that's what that's for. So what happens is the information is in Zipforms. As long as you have the information in parties, when it does single sign on and it connects with Docusign, it transfers that information over and it automatically populates and it enables all of those to drop in. So it's a critically important step that saves you.
Yeah.
Think of that over an annual basis. Think about, we had one agent that wrote 29 offers on one client when the market really got crazy. So imagine if, and they were new writing the contract. So every time they made mistakes about 5 times on every contract for about the first 20.
Wow.
Imagine if they sent them to signature and I allowed it to go all the way to signature before saying, oops, I missed this, which would be bad on me, right? And they had to drag all those signatures every time.
I don't know how many times
You'd want to quit the business by the time it was over. Okay.
So only other comment, Lisa, I think at this point is note that if you guys saw, right, Lisa click and selected from the library, the different forms of purchase contract, the standard, inside of Zipforms when you're building your transaction, there are a package, a buyer package and a listing package, and all the addenda and the purchase contract or the ERS on that end, like they're built in there for you, so you won't miss, technically, you won't miss a form. But it's all there for you. And should you want to then delete one, then you can remove it, right? But template usage is, package use is helpful.
Yeah, so I closed that Docusign and back to Zipforms. And you see now I have this envelope, signature envelope. It's not going to let you edit or do anything with it, right? You can view the details in the history. Once they're signed, if you go back to the documents, they'll show up in a folder that looks like this archive folder. They'll show up as signing packets, the way you named them. When I sent that signing packet, like offer packet, it'll come back and all the documents will drop in there along with the summary page. And I'll show you what one of mine looks like if we have time so you can see it. Okay, to Bodma's request, which is how can you fill in things using Docusign? You don't want to do it very often, but if you do, the one form that you have to do it on most times is the lead-based paint. First thing is to know, if the property is built before 1978, there needs to be a lead disclosure. In the ideal world, the listing agent has had it filled out by their seller and they put it into the MLS so that you can pull it into Zipforms and just have your client sign it, initial as appropriate. I would say that's not done 99% of the time. Federal law requires that if a property is built before 1978 and it's a residential unit, that you have to have an addendum to the contract that contains the seller disclosure. So to have your client sign that disclosure prior to being filled out by the seller is what's called interlineation. It means you're forcing the seller to fill something in above your buyer's signature. That again is a fraud. So we don't want to do that. So the lead paint is the important one. Now, by the way, so I'm going to go back to the Hawaii Association and I misspelled lead, so it didn't show up. There are two lead paint disclosures. One is called LBP, and that's for landlord and tenant. The one that actually has the word lead spelled out is the one we use for buyers and sellers. Make sure you use the right one. So the easiest way is just to type it. And what I want to do with this one is point out the form. This is all the part that the seller is supposed to fill out before it goes to the buyer. The business practice in Honolulu is to provide this form to the listing agent in the manner that it's supposed to be provided so that they can return it and have it be an addendum to the contract at ratification. So to do this correctly, if the seller hasn't filled it out, the only two things that your client can enact from the outset is to say they've received the pamphlet called Protect Your Family from Lead in the Home, which you should give to your buyers early on anyway. The law says the seller's supposed to give it to them. That doesn't happen. So we want to give it to them. And they would initial here that says they received copies of the information listed above, but there is no information above. And then they can either check that they've received a 10-day opportunity or mutually agreed upon time, which would be your J1, or they've waived the opportunity to conduct a risk assessment. Now, what Bodma is referring to is a lot of times you haven't had this discussion until you're sending the form over. And we're going to check one of these boxes using Docusign. Frankly, it's better to have the conversation before you get to this point and say, do you want to do a risk assessment and have a lead-based inspector come out and scratch off paint and send it to a lab and find out? Or do you want to waive it? Now, let's talk about the reality of this. This law has been around since before 1978. It's now 31, 40, it's a lot of years, 42 years later. If there was lead-based paint, it's probably been painted over a number of times. I will guarantee you that if the property was built before 1978, it's 95% certain, just picking a number out of my hat, that there's lead paint somewhere under those, buried under those layers of paint. And I will also tell you that I've only ever seen one of these forms filled out in the affirmative. Every seller says, I have no knowledge. The only time I've seen it filled out in the affirmative is in a condominium where the building has done an inspection because they were doing work and they've disclosed it there. I've seen it once. So you rarely have it filled out anyway, other than nope, no, nothing. And the reality is it's there. So where this law came out is we had a lot of cases in the 80s where kids were having brain damage because they were chewing on the doors and the windowsills and ingesting paint. And it's a toxic situation for little kids, and they were seeing brain damage and learning deficits. And so that's part of why this law got enacted in tenements where kids were getting damaged from lead paint, and the use of lead in paint was outlawed. This many years later, we still have to follow the law. It, by the way, is I think a $10,000 fine for not having this attached to the contract at the outset. So that's on you. If you don't get this done with the contract, that's on you. So that's why we go compliance to make sure this is done correctly. In the best world, our client says one of these two and we go ahead and check it. And then when it goes over to them for signature, then we don't have to put an X box. But let's say I didn't, and I send this to eSign, and I'm just going to leave this name on it. And I send it over, and I pick my buyer and seller, so buyer 2 and buyer 1, and close. And I'm going to change them both to number 1. And it shows up in the signature package in Docusign in just a second. 2 things I want to show you. Sonia's becoming an expert on this. The first thing is know that it's going to automatically populate all of these signatures, and they shouldn't be there. So we're going to click on it and hit the backspace button, click on it and hit the backspace button so that the only thing they're signing is that I gave them the lead-based pamphlet, which you should keep in your computer and send to them. It's in the shared drive, it's in intranet, and it's available from the EPA. All you have to do is Google EPA, protect your family from lead in the home, and download it. It was recently updated, but even if you give them an older version, it doesn't matter. And I'm going to take away all the signatures because if you read what's above it, the following parties have reviewed the information above and certified to the best of their knowledge that the information they have provided is true and correct. Well, there is no information. So we've got to remove these signatures. And the only thing we're going to send is that. Now, here's the part that Bodden is talking about. What if I got to this point and I didn't put the X here? And this could be something else that you just need to fix on a PDF and you don't have a PDF editor. The way I do this is I pick whose signature it's going to be under, and you want it to be the first person. So it's either these guys, and I'm going to pull, in this case, a text box. There's also a checkbox, but that's like advanced. So I'm going to pull a checkbox or a text box. I'm going to put it over here. I'm going to type an X in it. It will now show up. I can actually put it here. So I can add the text even over here. X. I can make it, format it. I can make it a different font. I can make it nice and big. I can make it bold. And then I want to mark it read only. Okay, now I want to make it so that it fits in that box. And I
If
can
you
move.
accidentally do required field, what happens? Do they have to like click on it?
Yeah, so if you leave it a required field, then they have to click on it. And you guys, I've seen some of you do that where you have me sign at the bottom, you use a text box in Docusign. Please check it as read only. Otherwise, what happens? Some people are putting just a blank box. I may be on my phone and I have to go click and then I have to type my name and then accept it. And it's really a pain. So don't have your clients have to fill things in, but maybe there was a selection, like I wanted them to check that box, then I really have to learn how to use the checkbox. And I don't know how to use it. Otherwise I'd teach you. But you make it read only so they don't have to. I could make it unrequired and then they wouldn't fill it out. If it's read only, it's going to be there anyway. Okay. And these are kind of advanced techniques that you can use. If it's filled out ahead of time, so I would also say when you write an offer, the only time the broker on the other side has to fill out page 14 and sign it if it's a rejection and you request it. So page 14, the other broker, listing broker, and a counter offer on the bottom by the other broker other than the one that wrote it, they don't need to sign that unless it's a rejection and the writing party requests it. But I think it's still a smart thing to put in the brokerage name. You won't know the BIC name, but you'll know the brokerage name. Put it in and then they don't have to auto type it. By the way, there is another way of doing this because let's say that I was putting in a brokerage name. I've got the company name here. As long as I have it filled in, I can drag a company name if I have it filled in their header data. Okay. And then I send it, but I'm not going to send it. But that's how you put in a fill-in box or text field. Okay, that's everything. So let me stop share. And I have did anybody, should I stop the recording, you think? Yeah, I'm going to stop the recording.